Hello, everyone. How does everyone like the fresh? Oh, you know what? Hold on. We have to freshen things up here. Let me fix things. Hold on. Oh, and things still aren't right. What's going on? There we go. There we go. That looks a little fresher for the show. New logo. Working on some new stuff for the channel. Like I said, constantly working. How is everybody in the chat? For the record, TA was first at 3:34 p.m. I just wanted to acknowledge that. It was duly noted and welcome. Also, we have Director Arcater. Welcome to the chat. Ichabod Orange was in here. We've got a couple of bots lingering around and pissing people off. Feel free, however. Don't care about the bots. Just let them go. Let's see. Who else do we got in here? I see a Patrice Ripley. I see a Nightwolf. Welcome to the chat. Do I got anybody else? Adam K just popped in and said hello. That's perfect. Well, I say we get off to a good start. We have ourselves quite the conundrum. And it's... Oh, isn't it a conundrum? Which image do I use? I don't even remember what I set up where. I think it's this one. Yep, that's the one. Is global warming real? Is climate change real? And is mankind the reason? Yeah, I just rang the bell. Awesome, the bell is awesome to ring. Man-made climate change is what a lot of us were kind of raised to believe, that the things that we're doing are contributing to the warming of the earth. It's really hard to make a concession as to what the main reason of this is, especially when you really look deep into it. Now, I'm not going to argue that the climate is changing, because there's no argument there. The climate is constantly in a progressive change. It never stops changing. It changes as a reaction to the things that are being done, and it changes as a regular change that it should. Nightwolf comes in and says every 25 years the earth cools itself and the earth warms itself. Right now we are in a global... We'll get back to that. On topic, cows are assholes, and assholes cause a significant amount of greenhouse gases. You know what's really weird that I found out is... And I apologize, as this stream is going to be in multiple directions. Also, I'm not sure where Data is, but I'm hoping he'll be along. And if there's any problems in the stream, let me know, because I am running a lot of stuff to try and show you a few cool things that I got. So, when I questioned global warming and Data and I started talking about it, his question to me was, "Are you sure?" Well, am I sure? That's a good question. That's a perfectly logical explanation when you explain something out. Well, global warming is the warming of the planet. We are warming right now. There's, ice is melting. The caps are receding. It's the most recession we've seen in a large amount of time. And he goes, "Are you sure?" Oh, am I sure? Am I sure? Was the badum to the am I sure? Or was it to the cows with methane? Oh, you know what else I got just for today's show? This is going to be enough. Somebody's racing. And they're loud. Just for the Numbed Wasteland show, there's always new things that especially I learn. I do a lot of reading. I watch hours and hours of video to try and gather as much intel as I can on both sides to see what makes sense. And I try to present information as I see it, as well as the information as well as I can provide it. But I also try to be comical, so once in a while it's a I can see it's a miracle, and I just love learning things, whatever. Ryder, welcome to the chat. How are you doing? So today's topic, as everybody can freely see, is going to be climate change. And in climate change and global warming and whether or not it's man-made, I would like to offer as much information as possible. Now, let me first say that when you look for information on global warming, it's abundantly that man is a large contribution of global warming because of an industrial era that sort of began around the 1850s. Interesting coincidence that along the same time as the Industrial Revolution began to kick off and we began to create machines to help do the work, that's also the same time that we began to measure temperature and to record the measurements of temperatures for the time periods that we lived through. So around 1850, some of the earliest, best recordings of measurements of time were taken. And then around 1880 is when the primary measurements started getting taken, when the United States put together organizations, I want to say NASA, and then followed by a few others that would record the information for us to be able to build on. Now, I want to know kind of what the chat's questions are. And I had a whole bunch of questions when I started researching global warming. At first, I watched the regular videos. I watched the global warming is real, it's 100%. This is what you need to know. This is what we need to do to counter it, and blah, blah, blah. Stuff we've all heard, whether it be in school, through commercials, through Obama, it doesn't matter. I thought to myself by the "are you sure" is, where are the warmest and coldest places on the planet and how are they affected? And if you know anything about general science of the planet, you know there's the 33rd degree parallel, which is basically the Tropic of Cancer and Cancer and Capricorn, something? No, I'm getting one of them wrong. The Tropic of Cancer, and there's another tropical line at the 33rd degree parallel from the 0 degree equator. Those are basically the angles at which the sun will come down directly at a 90-degree angle over the planet during the course of the sun's projection as we rotate because of the movement of our planet. And that's basic. And then you have the poles and the meridian and the degrees around the planet. Okay, got 2 questions. Perfect. Want these questions. You dragged me away from GPP for this. Ryder, you are welcome to choose your stream. I always have a set time and I try to do it on a regular basis, so it is up to you. I appreciate you coming if you come. One of the biggest contributors of greenhouse gases and how... 2 questions. 1, what is the biggest contributor of greenhouse gases and how easily could we reduce these contributions? To what the hell was the almost president's name? I think I know who you're talking about. The guy with the dark hair. I don't remember his name either. He didn't succeed. That's how that goes. Al Gore? Maybe? That was it. Okay. Sounds right. Alright, so questions to me. And the obvious one waited till last. So I'll state it first. I don't remember where I found it. It was on this page. Oh, well, that's why I'm going to do that one last. Okay, that's a lot of information. We'll get back to it. Alright, I'm going to kind of read through some of this article, skim through it, or I'll read as fast as I can and trip over my words for you to make this show as informative as possible. As we shall see below, the Earth is in a temperature increasing portion of the climate cycle that has been going on for thousands of years. However, the rise has been very modest recently. In the 100 years from 1900 to 2000, the average global temperature increased by only 1.1 degrees Fahrenheit, and hardly anyone noticed. Generally, global warming may have some negative effects, but our concerns should be focused on the climate large-scale local change, as NASA states. The real threat may not be the gradual rise in global temperature and sea level, but the redistribution of heat over the Earth's surface. Some spots will warm while others will cool. These changes and accompanying shifts in rainfall patterns could relocate agricultural regions across the planet. It is redistribution of climate, i.e., large-scale local climate changes, that should be the focus of our concern. So let us begin the discussion about climate change by looking at the big picture using historical data and try to bound the limits of the temperature change by investigating what historically happened in the past. The Vostok project
is located on a mountain of glacial ice in eastern Antarctica, about 800 miles from the South Pole, as shown in the picture at the left of East Antarctica, in a huge mountainous area about the size of Australia, completely covered by very thick ice and very cold. No summer melting. About 70% of the Earth's fresh water is stored in an East Antarctic, West Antarctic. What? Is stored in as ice in East Antarctica. West Antarctica is rather flat. The section on the left, to the left portion of the photo, ice does melt in the summer, and penguins inhabit the area. In the 1970s, Russia began drilling ice cores at Vostok to study ancient temperatures, carbon dioxide, atmospheric amounts, dust, and other items in the climatological interest. Greenhouse ice cores cannot be used to study the changes in carbon dioxide concentrations because there is too much dust in Greenland ice, which decomposes and releases non-atmospheric carbon dioxide into the ice. Vostok Station is about 11,400 feet above sea level and has been manned year-round since 1957. In 1974, it was discovered and there was a very large freshwater lake deep beneath the ice, but it was not published until 1993. Take a breath for a moment. What do you guys have? Pokey, Algor, that was it. Hey ho, Skull. Hey, welcome, Hawk Silk.
Alright. I hate reading entire reports for you guys because that sounds like I'm going to bore you. So I'll either read it really fast, or let's get down to some of the data. Alright. This is right below where I was. 1996, hole 5G reached a depth of 11,900 feet and was terminated by the request of Scientific Committee of Antarctic Research that expressed concerns about the possible contamination of Lake Vostok from drilling fluids. In 1999, the final Vostok findings were published, giving the world climate history of 420,000 years. In February 2012, scientists were allowed to continue drilling using refined techniques and reach the surface of the lake at the depth of 12,365 feet. This is them drilling. These long chutes that you see these people with are called ice cores. What they do is they take a hollow drill bit and they drill down, they pull the ice core out, and they store it and freeze it. And apparently what they do with this ice core is they set it up on a special melting device. And the ice core will sit on this like coffee plate warmer with these special slits in it, and it'll slowly melt one little layer at a time at the very bottom. And in the melting, it collects the oxygen and the water that are the particles of air and gas and the water that come off of the ice core, and it sends them through a hose that runs through a the name of it's at my tongue. It discovers the molecular composition of the particles within the water that was in the ice and within the air and the gas that's within the ice. And it measures that there is a high CO2 raise. Now the CO2 raise, hey Sora, welcome. The CO2 raise has been mostly discovered to be a part of man's existence on the planet. However, I'm willing to bet there's been other CO2 problems on the planet. Now, somebody in here mentioned gas. What is one of the worst? I believe methane was on the list. Hello, TA. I believe methane was on the list of one of the worst gases. And apparently, as the water warms, it releases the methane gas that's stored in the water that's usually in colder areas. Apparently, there's methane deposits being released through the water in the ocean. And when the ocean warms, it releases that methane gas into the atmosphere, which contributes to greenhouse gases. Now, greenhouse gases, if you're not unsure about them, are the gases that once the warmth of the sun comes through the atmosphere of the planet, the greenhouse gases trap the warmth of the sun in the planet. There's other gases that refract the light, that either scatter it or disperse it or reflect it off the atmosphere, also reflect it off the surface and back through the atmosphere at better rates. Sun likes to reflect best off of ice, and one of the arguments with global warming is that as the water warms and the ice melts in the north, in the Arctic, that the more water there is, the more the sun's heat is collecting in the water, and the less the ice is reflecting the warmth and light back out. I should move that so my emails don't vibrate my microphone. So, squirrels, methane. Alright, so here's something weird fact. Within the last couple of decades, apparently there was a hillside in California that we had found methane deposits. Once we had used the methane deposits and tested the hill or something along those lines, we started storing methane in the hill. And eventually there was a crack in the hill and we lost methane. 500,000 metric tons or whatever it was. I forget what the calculation was, but it was a huge amount of methane being stored in the hillside in California. And one of the problems they were saying was that huge amount of methane being released at one time was a hazardous gas being released into the atmosphere that would contribute to the global warming. How much? Hey, a wild fox appears and goes, ice, meth, crack? Jeez, you must be in the right place. I don't do that anymore. Stop it. If we look at the situation that we're in, they say global warming. Now, global warming to them and the fact that man did it, they're seeing the global warming, watching it through the scales of measurements as our technology increases. We're not seeing what was seen before 1850. And when they do the ice samples, yes, they're seeing increases in certain gases. And they're also reading differences in the thicknesses and levels and measurements between the layers, which I can sort of argue against the layers with some thoughtful process. But again, I'm still looking into this. Apparently, the North Pole gets as warm as roughly 30 degrees. Is that Fahrenheit? I think it's Fahrenheit. Now I feel like a dummy. Fahrenheit, right? Celsius is, you Brits. Sorry, apologize if that's offensive. You Brits are C, we're F. We'll tell you to FUC something. I don't know. The point being, 32 degrees is where water begins to melt, or where water begins to freeze, where ice begins to melt. So if the North Pole sets at its highest somewhere around 30 degrees in the measurements, then it's not often going to hit the point where it melts, except in the summertime at 30 degrees when the sun is bearing down on it relatively clearly. That means low cloud coverage, because the North Pole is again 67 degrees, right? 57 degrees. It's 90 minus 33 would be 57 degrees off of the North Pole. So the sun has to come through the atmosphere at a heavy angle, which gives more or less cloud coverage, the ability to deflect that sunlight. So if the North Pole gets decent sunlight, it can melt. What's supposedly warming and breaking away the northern pole or melting the Arctic cap is as the sun collects in the water around the North Pole, the water begins to help break away. And the water, as it begins to warm, also begins to change the properties of what it'll do. Now, in all fairness, let's look at this. Global warming has caused air to move further north and further south within the Coriolis fields as it progresses around the planet. So we're seeing the cold spikes when the Coriolis moves up north of the areas where it's usually that cold. And then we're seeing the warm spikes when there's not a whole lot of cold air being transferred or leveled down through. This is what I see. I'm not a scientist. This is what I see. Not as much as cows. I'm not sure actually how much cows produce in methane, but that's interesting whether we as a species not only ourselves cause, but produce enough livestock to cause this problem that would not necessarily happen if we weren't here. That's a very good argument. I'll have to look deeper into that if we do another show. So this is the carbon dioxide readings for parts per million by temperature variation. Change in temperature, dioxide. What's the bottom? What's the bottom supposed to be? Linear. I'm assuming it's probably millimeters of the length of the readings. So they're seeing that there have been increases and decreases in carbon dioxide. I'm not sure. The peak temperature delta, deviation from average, is 2 to 3 degrees Celsius, 63.1 degrees Fahrenheit, repeated 5 times. Huh? I'm confused. Probably because I didn't read it all. Alright, so what was I in this one for? There was a lot of important information in this. Industrial age temperature increases, and I apologize that you guys can only read some of this. I could probably block out the earth, but I'd have to move a whole lot around. I tried to make it look decent for you guys to watch. So industrial age temperature increase basically from 1870-ish, right here between the 1860 and 1880 marker, where my mouse is where you can see we were kind of headed down in temperature, and then up, and then we took a drop, and then up more, and then took a small drop, and then we kind of did a fluctuation uphill. 30-year cooling period between 1940 and what, 1960, 70-ish almost, and then we started increasing into the 2000s. I don't know where I saw it. I might have it on one of these other tabs, but it is noticeable that we did a huge increase and then took a drastic drop the following year in temperature variations throughout the planet. These are post-glacial sea level rises. Again, as the water warms, the water takes up more space. Crusties of Jerzenko, welcome. New name. Love that you're here. If somebody subscribes while I'm live, there's this weird something like that. I'm gonna have to update it, but it's still funny. Moving on. Sea level rises. There's information here about the warming and cooling. By the way, apparently, when you look at the cloud coverage, there's 3 types of clouds. There's the high forming and the low forming clouds. I forget what all the names of them specifically are, but low forming clouds don't necessarily offer a lot of protection and reflection from the sun's light. The higher forming clouds do offer more protection. However, if the water vapor hasn't yet turned into cloud form and it's still in the gas form in the atmosphere, that water vapor offers more of the effect towards what methane would do, trapping the heat in the planet by creating it's weird to call it like a moisture barrier, but as it's moisture before it accumulates into clouds, it refracts and holds the heat in. And I'm not sure exactly how that works. I'm still looking into it, but this is what I'm reading in these studies. So having moisture in the air and not yet formed into clouds is a problem for buildup of heat and warmth on the planet. However, once they form into clouds, if there's large, heavy clouds, the ability to reflect the light coming from the sun is greater. Let's test this. Welcome, Tangerine Orange. Interesting. Where is global warming going? Atmosphere, continents, glaciers, and ice caps, 0.9%. Atmosphere, 2.3%. Continents, 2.1%. By the way, I'm going to, let me be a good host. I'm going to take all of these links. I'm going to figure out where my YouTube stream thing went, because I'm not watching it. So if there's, why isn't it working? There's a lag for something. I just saw a skull drop in there. Thank you. It should play the audio any second. I'm going to add some links in here in the description for people, and these are the 3 main sites I'm using for this stream. If you want to be able to read the text that goes with these images, it says all changes saved. You should be able to grab those and read the text. The first one I'm on right now is climatewarmingcentral.com. It's a climate change page. honestly, what this article does, as I read through it the first time, was it explains somebody's scientific findings because a study was put out, and how some of it is wrong as you get closer to the bottom. But most of this is the most reliable data I could find in certain things. But I do have other more reliable sources for the data to look at here in a minute. This just had the most data to be found, and I crunch for these shows sometimes. I consume a lot of information, so I'm not gonna get a lot of what there is out there. I'm gonna get a lot of what I can get to you in the time period I have to offer. Carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels. Now, I don't want to say that people are not at all responsible for part of what's happening with global warming. We might be making on ourselves the problems more extreme for what would have happened if we didn't have the machinery and the gases and other such things out there contributing to the emissions in the environment. However, as you look at it, there is a high plausibility, welcome Miss Steam, that we're not at all half or even 3/4 responsible for the primary movement of the temperature up and down. We're full of ourselves, kind of. Oh my God, we're doing horrible damage to the planet. Are we? Measure it. Show it. The total global temperature increase that I found over the measured 100 and something years was like 2 degrees. And the way the charts make some of it look is that it's worse. No, I think it was 1.6 degrees as a global temperature increase. From what I can see, most of that happens to be the farther through time that we progress. I'm not reading this, I'm saying this, but I'm trying to read as I do it, and that wasn't the word I was reading. For that sake of argument, let us assume that global warming continues at a modest pace by such that in the year 2100, the average world temperature is 2 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius warmer than 2000. IPCC's best estimate for the most likely scenario is 2.8 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Fahrenheit. That will be the realistic effect on the planet. So they're saying that as global warming increases without a change, that there will be another or a total of 2 to 3 or 2.8 degrees Celsius or 5 degrees Fahrenheit between the year 2000 and 2100. The worms killed me. They made me laugh. Now that I know what they are, I'm going to see what I can do about dropping a pipe in to clear the spring. Maybe drilling a hole, dropping a pipe, and making the spring pump through a hole, and then make it like a fountain or something. I don't want to leave the water on the ground because I'm trying to get rid of all the extra insects that bite. Moving through, one of the worries with the North Pole is, and I'll explain this because I'm moving backwards through my line of questioning, by the way, guys. Backwards, you say. I gotta stop saying I've been listening to how to improve videos, and they tell me to stop saying Now I'm meditating on the We do contribute to a lot of what might be advancing the increase of global warming, but I don't think we contribute to global warming to the effect that scientists are trying to claim. Being that I can't find good data, you're going to tell me what you have recorded, scientists, from roughly 160 years of records. You're going to take that and ice cores, which again, I'm going to say that in a slightly warm winter season, that even the cores could have ended up with something that we're not thinking of, that we're going to approach as we warm and then we'll cool back off. I could be wrong even, and that's the point, is they could be wrong. Let's measure, oh yeah, global warming, great. Actually, it's funny you should say that, because that reminds me that apparently there is a fact of scientists out there that call this the global warming gate or something like that. I'm sure Data would know it. Where's are you, Data? Oh yeah, I just read that. Denny Crane, are you the real Denny Crane? Should I know a Denny Crane? Is that from one of the shows on TV? I might not know it. Okay, so I'm at the bottom of this report. That was the end. Oh, look at that. Climate warming. A great debate. I love it. Look at the pun. I did not write this article. Promise. I didn't know it was there until today. What do we got here? Carbon footprint comparison across technologies. Natural gas, solar, and wind. Of course they're going to be lower carbon footprint. Here's some weird questions I have. Now, volcanoes come up on some of these studies, and volcano coverage, when the ash gets released into the atmosphere, acts as partly a reflectant, but it also acts as partly a greenhouse warming effect. So it holds some of the heat in that does manage to get in, but it also prevents some of it by blocking out the atmosphere from accepting the heat, which causes a cooling effect. We're getting an awful lot of volcanoes as the planet heats up. So as the planet heats, does itself kind of, I don't know, when you sweat a lot and eat the wrong foods and you rub your face gets greasy and you get pimples as a reaction. But if you don't sweat a lot, sometimes you get fewer pimples as, a counter argument. Does that mean as the planet warms and sweats a little that the volcanoes, the pimples pop up, and sometimes they're just gonna blow, other times they're just gonna sit there for a while and be noticeable? I don't know. Horrible analogy. Why do I use pimples for an analogy? It just works sometimes. It just does. Flagging stream. Be right back. Oh no! Who did I offend? The Earth? Damn it! Damn it! I offended the Earth. Horrible person. Oh well. There's that again. U.S. climate boundary line is moving eastward. I have theories on how to reverse desertification in some areas, but if the planet doesn't allow for the reversal, so you're not going to necessarily get rid of a desert in an area that's the hottest on the planet continuously throughout the year. That's difficult. My ideas are a commingling of desalination of water using ground lakes. So obviously in deserted areas they don't have a lot of water, and obviously one of the problems is moving clean water inland to where they need it. Another huge problem being desalination of water often costs 4 times what it does to just filter already clean water. Water desalinates itself by evaporation. We all know this. It'll also desalinate itself by moving inland. So as water moves inland through lake bodies, it will desalinate. If you don't run it through pipes, if you allow it to move inward through special lake complexes and allow it to possibly need to be pumped. So I guess in some cases, if you allow it to move inland, and then the further inland you get, the better the cleaner the water will be. It'll have less salt content in it, and thus you'll have closer to fresh filterable water. That's just me being a numbskull. It probably will never work because it's hugely expensive and quite a project, but it's an idea. Oh, we got the greenhouse gas in here. Solar radiation absorbed by the Earth is 235 large W divided by meters squared. So what's the W mean? I'm assuming warmth by meters squared. I'm not going to read through all of this right now. I strongly encourage you guys to this is climatewarmingcentral.com. Let's go over here to climate change global. This is National Oceans and Atmospheric Administration. This is www.climate.gov. News features understanding climate change, global temperatures. The history of the global surface temperature since 1880. Here is a progressive map of the increase of the surface temperature in the last 160 years. Again, since we roughly started collecting data. Now on this map, I see easy fluctuations. Let's Can I zoom in here? So from roughly 1880 to 1905, 1910-ish, there was, from what I can see, like a down spike. This all sort of got colder for a while. If we started here, I guess the effects of what we were doing in the the mid to late 1800s would slowly begin to affect us in the early to mid 1900s. There was increases and decreases beyond the norm throughout this time. And now, here we are. It goes to about 2015, I want to say. Let's look a little closer. 2016, 18. It goes to 2018. We are at global temperature anomaly Celsius compared to 1901 to 2000. We are 0.8 above. Almost a degree above where we were in 1900. So, to recap, we've gone up 1 degree average worldwide temperature. Yes, you're going to feel funny effects because the effects, drastic heating and cooling that you're feeling is because as the temperature decreases and there's less in the North Pole, because most of us are on the northern hemisphere, and I'll get there in just a second, I promise. I have a couple of images. We are going to feel as the Coriolis brings cool pockets down drastically farther out of the north and brings warm farther up into the north. I have all of the images somewhere on my hard drive. I think this was the primary thing I have in here. This is a heat temperature map. The gray is lower temperatures. The red is hotter temperatures. As you see, most of them circulate around the north. I need a drink. I'm getting cotton-mouthed here talking. I know. I apologize that it looks tiny. I did provide links if you'd like to look at these studies later to see what I was looking at and whether I was using it right or wrong. Understand, though, what I'm saying is, overall, the temperature doesn't seem important. However, it feels worse than it is. So let's explain this. In the area that I live in, I've seen temperatures as hot as 102 already. I think we hit like 99 this year. High point. It gets as cold as, I want to say, -6 last year. It didn't get, this hasn't been as rough a year as other years have been. It's been mellower. But still, to go from, let's average this out. Let's say from -10 to 100. Because I remember some really cold days we did have for short periods. Let's say from -10 to 100. That is a 110 degree temperature variant. At the North or South Poles, they don't get that kind of temperature variant. They sway roughly 40 degrees from their normal temperature through a yearly period from some of the research that I've done. Oh, I drink a soda, I get burpy. I'm sorry. I really do apologize for that. I don't like burping on stream. I don't usually drink normal soda. It's blue screen while I load. It's the blue screen of death. I'm all done. I can't do it anymore. I can't afford another computer. No. Then we'll all have giant bugman people in a few more years. Part of the thought process is as the planet begins to cool, vegetation will begin to move back into areas where it can survive again. So some of the desert areas will begin to sustain plant life. Argument there is sometimes when the soil dries out for long periods of time, the nutrients are no longer there. Some nutrients will dry and stay in the soil while others die off. Now this, you guys can't read this. The best way to look at this is on the outside, and then I'll try and zoom in and just read a few points of this for you to explain where this lines up to you. No bug people. If there's a lot of plants, if the vegetative life around the planet begins to grow in abundance, you'll see the oxygen increase on the planet. Now, I'm not sure how oxygen plays into the effects of global warming because I haven't really seen it in any of the studies as an affecting principle. The oxygen increase will allow insects to grow larger because that's how they build from a large oxygen content, larger bodies, easier to breathe, easier to intake what you need. Humans would almost definitely develop to even larger sizes if the vegetation growth around the planet would increase because we would have an easier to achieve supply of oxygen. Our bodies would receive more of it easier. So we could supply oxygen to our heart and our head and our limbs faster because there's a more ready supply of it. Just saying. We'd all get bigger, not just the bugs. Sucks if humans are first aliens. What if humans are the first aliens? Dad is not here. He will argue humans might be the first aliens, or that the aliens are the first humans, whichever way you want to look at that. All right, global temperatures from 2500 BC to 2040 AD. Major global cooling from 2007 to 2009. I'm reading from the blue box up on the top left. Let me move my mouse so you guys can see it. A 0.9 degree Fahrenheit drop in global temperatures occurred from October 2007 to February 2009. Wait, what was that? Did everybody hear that? A 0.9 degree Fahrenheit drop in global temperature occurred from October to February globally. Okay, that's almost a degree. That seems important since we're talking, 1.6 degrees in the last 160 years being the influential reason we're discussing global warming. Where am I here? 1100 BC is this, don't move. Is this very warm, large scale. So 1100 BC apparently marks somewhere around the Hebrew exodus from Egypt after the only scattered volcanic eruptions. So it seems there's scattered volcanic eruptions preceding this climate top out. And again, like I said, it's going to take a few years for whatever starts to happen to begin to have an effect. Sudden cool down between 1100 and it looks like 550 BC, and then it got cold around 250 BC as it bottoms out during the Greek Empire. 250 BC after Vesuvius Etna, Italy. I don't know what that means. The Roman Empire, it got warm again somewhere around 200 to 250 AD. Is it AD or ADE? BC. I forget what it is anymore. I'm not up with the times of all the terms. Dear God, no giant arthropods. Why not? Dark Ages, cold again. 55 eruptions during the Dark Ages. 535 to 550 Krakatoa, Indonesia, and at least 10 other eruptions. Right here on the scale, just as it goes into the Dark Ages, there was a sudden cool down. Warm during the medieval warm period. There ran at the high point around 1300 AD. Cooled back down drastically around 1607 when Jamestown was founded to 54.3 degrees Fahrenheit, roughly, during a cold, what was called the Little Ice Age, very cold. And then there's a high point here in about 1991 where Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted at the high point. There was many eruptions during the cold period. Apparently, Papua Danyan, Indonesia, Lakadagar, Iceland, Mount Uzapen, Japan. So, according to this climate model, it's saying that as we hit the 2030s, we're going to hit a hot, dry cycle, fossil fuel emissions. That's in red. And on the bottom, it has a 2020s colder. So I guess This model is predicting we're going to hit a small cold lapse, roughly near what the nomadic time era of the Great Migration was in the 1700s. So not as cold as the little ice age we came out of from the 1600s, but back in the 1600 BC, so 3200 years ago. I giggled because I'm immature. Wait, what? Women arguing over pizza toppings. Okay. My wife puts pineapple on hers. Argument over. I won't eat it. We are going to enter a cold era here in the next few years. And I did see the scale this said in the last few years we have been starting to drop in temperature. So let's get to some fun thoughts I have. I'm going to pull this off the screen and I'm going to put this on the screen. Maybe. Work. Technical difficulty being experienced is... Oops. Nope, not that one. There we go. That's what I did wrong. Alright. When you look at the globe, and these are very hard shots to find, that's why they don't match. When you look at the globe, you normally look at the globe looking along the equatorial line as you spin it, like a globe. How often do you stop and look at the north and south? They're kind of determine what they are. And this is where I first went with this, was where are the coldest places? Well, I know the warmest places and I know the coldest places. So what are the temperature differences in these places? And if the temperature differences in the cold areas are roughly 40 degrees during their entire year-long cycle, then they're not changing much. And I was trying to figure out how is the ice actually melting if the temperature up there doesn't reach a melting point, and it's because the water around it is obviously absorbing the coolness and degrading the temperature. And it's not forming enough new ice during cold periods to grow. With that said, the North Pole is water. The North Pole is all water. There's land underground. There's a ridge that the North Pole, the ice, sits on. And that's what the North Pole is. It's just ice. There's no land there. It's just ice, water. That's it. Interesting enough, the South Pole has been making some growth over the last few years. And the temperatures on the southern hemisphere of the planet are cooler than the temperatures of the northern hemisphere of the planet. Regularly. Makes you almost want to move to the southern side. There's less land on the southern side of the planet as well. And I didn't read a lot into this, but when you look at the North Pole, there's a base several hundred miles away, and the North Pole is the biggest one over controversy over where it is. First, interesting weird fact. If you've ever held a compass and let the compass point north, another freaking atheist, welcome to the chat. The temperature has been dropping because the oceans are absorbing more CO2. This is causing the pH to increase. Ooh, but hold on. The land at the South Pole allows for the ice to not sit in the water. So the ice has been building up on land because it sits above the ocean level. The South Pole is land. There, if it all melted, there would be land there. But because there's land there, it's allowing the South Pole to collect more ice during its winter months. Now, welcome, Pleiades. How are you doing today? If you go to the North Pole is weirdly descripted, and it's in one of the reports I was reading. I want to say it was the first one, the really long one. It could have been any number of reports I've been through today. The North Pole is deceiving. We have what we call the North Pole. Kind of our Santa's home, the North Pole. Reference, of course. There's the magnetic North Pole, which moves. There is the North Pole as for reference of the orbital axis. And that also moves roughly relative to... No, not entirely. It's semi-relative to the magnetic North Pole, but not completely because there's more change. And then there was another one that I can't remember what it was called. There was like 4 references to how to refer to as the North Pole. The magnetic North Pole is interesting because if you have a compass and it points at north, and this is something I learned funny today that makes absolute sense. I've probably heard it before. The compass points north. That's the north side of your compass. If the north side of your compass points north, then north is the south magnetic pole. Dun dun. Yes. So north is the south magnetic pole. Interestingly enough, though, that's not an issue because in 173,000 years or whatever it said, it should flip back over and magnets will point north is south. Are your waffles round then? Only if I make them round. If I use my maker, they're square. I have to buy round waffles and make them. Welcome, Chris. Oh yeah, I said welcome. I can't say your name. Crystalist of Jerzenko. Good enough. Freaking magnets, how they work. Now, the magnetic North Pole is moving, what is it, 25 feet per day, roughly 25, or not per day, per year, roughly 25 feet per year, and because of the size of the planet, and that being an actual small progression across the planet, it has to hit, I don't remember what parallel, but I would assume somewhere around maybe the 45th parallel before the magnetic attraction between the localities of where the magnetic draw of the planet is. So the magnetic draw of the North Pole is not at the surface. It's like, what was it, 500 and something meters below the surface of the North Pole is the magnetic draw, which is what allows the pole to shift so much. I look stupid. ICP reference. I look stupid? Bot looks stupid. I probably look stupid. So the magnetic pole is going to shift. I wonder... No, wait, I lost my train of thought. That happens too. I wondered what the difference between the north and south were. Were we making measurement readings based on where land was? The answer to that is no. The measurement readings are taken from satellites. They're done thermally. The problem with the argument of climate change, to get back to that argument, I think it's this one. Yes, to get back to that argument, is global warming real? Yes, the globe is warming. It's warmed 1.6 total degrees in the last 145 or 50 years to 160 years since we started doing measurements worldwide using our own measuring people, taking measurements from around the world. So since we started measuring it, we can say that the temperature has gone up 2 degrees. I know 2 degrees in an area that I live is a minute amount. 2 degrees is 1/20th of what the caps have as a fluctuation of their temperature per year. 2 degrees is apparently almost nothing on this scale, where we move from 54.3 degrees Fahrenheit to 58.6 degrees Fahrenheit between the 1600s and 2016. From rough estimates of scientific data at global temperatures for over 4,500 years. This is from the longrangeweather.com. I can't be 100% certain, but it's really hard to find data from before they started taking readings. There is a lot of information in here. Feel free to check it for yourself. I know you're not looking at the one I'm looking at, so I'll close it and stop looking at it. Is climate change real? Yes. You know what? The climate changes every day almost. I can get up some mornings and have it change more than 40 degrees in a day. So how is the overall temperature change of 40 degrees at a pole different? The temperature is not as important as the speed in which it is warming. The speed in which it is warming has increased at a decent pace, which we can say humans are a contribution of. It possibly has increased beyond what we think has happened before us within a reasonable time frame of 4,000 to 5,000 years. But is it unthinkable that the changes that are happening because of us doing what we're doing are going to have almost a chemical reaction on the planet, and the planet will do what it does to react, and that reaction will possibly kick us back into another cooling stage. At which point, we as a planet will understand what's going on and work with that. We will have to do certain things that will either push us further into cooling or back into warming. And the technology will grow because there will be a need for it. Pushing for it now before people are necessarily seeing the need, even if the need is there, you just got to get people to see it. It's really hard to show somebody where 2 degrees is very important, especially if you're gonna sit and look at weather data. And yeah, it is the speed at which it's increasing, but in school you're taught that this is a problem, this is what's happening, it's increasing. But then if you look into more data later and you look into scientific studies and you research this, you learn that it's really not that large. And you start to look directly for evidence of where do you look? As a non-scientist, as my following, as small as it may be, where would you all look for information? I gotta reload this because that didn't work, and I'm gonna make it work for you. For information on things that you're looking for on global warming, where do you look? You look for those statistics. You look for the longest chart. You look for comparative analysis. You want to take, has this happened before? I always ask the question, has this happened before? Well, not always, but most situations, you ask the question, has it happened before? What can we refer to for weather.com? What can we refer to for knowledge? I hear that. I hear something.
Hi.
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 How are you? Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I was asleep.
You are just fine. You know how I am. The show must still go on.
What
I
time
am too
is
old
it?
to have learned this in school. LOLweather.com. Yeah, I guess it's not a wonderful source, but it was a good article, and there's a lot of information in it, and I was looking for diverse opinions around the topic. It is
What
8
time
o'clock.
is it? Jeez, I'm really late.
You
Fuck.
are fine. I'm trying to get one of these pages here to load on my end. Fuck your polls, mine's bigger. Also, I'm saying making waffles because flat earth. Oh, I'm just reading that. Nugs, thanks. I appreciate it.
Did you figure out if it was man-made climate change or not?
Well, I think I have personally come to the decision that it cannot be completely man-made. I want to say one of the reports I read said 2%. One of them said somewhere around 20%. I guess that all depends on, again, something somebody threw in here just a minute ago. It's not about the temperature increase, but the speed at which it's increasing, which could be relatively true. I'm sort of looking at this. Obviously, once we do a first show and I get through the general information, if we do another one, I'm going to find a subset of information and dig into that. Sora is wondering how you slept. Data.
Yeah, I guess I could tell you this. All the math they do to figure out if it's man-made climate change, it's all right. It's all 100%. And all the reports they do and all the models they do, they all prove 100% that it's man-made, climate change. The problem is that they just don't include everything.
Right.
And when they get their math correct, and when they get their formulas going, they get the result of man-made climate change. But the problem is where their starting point is. I mean, they say that the sun has, I think, 10% of change. In other words, effect on the temperature.
7 to 10% of the effect of the
Right.
planetary change of temperature is related to the sun and its movement through its 7-year cycle of heating and cooling.
Right. And that's just one aspect. You know, that's the known, and they're not even including the unknown. And when it comes to, like, you know, certain reports and whatnot, they don't ever cite the other reports. In other words, you've got 1,000 reports saying it's all man-made climate change, but none of those reports cite each other. You know, they talk about all these different aspects, and it's all the same, but none of them cite each other. So, yeah.
There was one convention in, was it 2000 or 2012? I watched a report from CBS, I think, about a scientist who was trying to go to the convention, but they didn't want to hear through anything he had to say. And he was discussing, this is how I caught on to it, after I had asked the question about what the ice buildup on the South Pole is, because coincidentally, we always hear about the North Pole, and you wonder why. It's because the North Pole is going to deplete faster. Interesting enough, a lot of the core samples that are being taken at both the North and the South, and both samples are being used for the same data. So even if we lose the North Pole or the data is a little different, they'll be able to use comparison of the poles.
You know, they don't include volcanic activity. They don't.
The one I was just referring to had a lot of volcanic activity charts for large volcanic eruptions in the last 4,500 years.
You know, there's so much stuff they don't include, and then there's stuff that really has nothing to do with mainstream. In other words, you know, just recently we've been exploring the idea that, matter of fact, it happens to be a YouTuber. This YouTuber has basically, in the past 10 years, been able to concentrate 300,000 people into a group called Suspicious Observers. And over the past 10 years, they started out talking about the sun, electricity, and earthquakes. The sun, electricity, and hurricanes. And mainstream science was laughing their ass off at them. And guess what? Mainstream science is now coming around to their point of view. They're the ones who invented an actual app that literally predicts earthquakes, their location, their size, and since it's been running, it's been over, I think it's been like 80% correct. That's pretty good odds. We're talking about pinpointing in less than 10% of all where earthquakes are. So you have 300,000 citizen scientists, and then you have the mainstream science. And there's one other prediction that they've come up with, these citizen scientists, that the term dark energy, it's a joke. In other words, so far, every single experiment that has been created to discover what dark matter is has failed.
Wow.
So dark matter is a term for dark matter is a term for the unknown, and there really isn't any dark matter. It probably is what they're thinking it is, which is electrical and electromagnetic.
Humans need to stop burning fossil volcanoes.
There you go.
If you look at volcanic activity, heavily abundant ash clouds and volcanoes again create a large, thick cloud in the upper atmosphere, which allows the sun to reflect more off of our atmosphere as opposed to absorbing it. However, when the heat does absorb or make it through, that cloud cover also traps some of that heat in. So as it thins out and more of it can get in, it traps that warmth in to build back up into a warming period.
We were always taught that clouds were created by, humidity and moisture, and moisture's forming around the dirt speck and this and that and the other. But it's come to recent attention that actually clouds are formed by the cosmic rays.
Really?
Cosmic rays generate clouds, and the solar system happens to have been in a dust cloud for a very for our lifetimes. I think even for human life, and we are just now coming out of this dust cloud. So from this point forward, we are going to be hit by more cosmic rays than we've ever been hit in the past. So this is going to
from a wild fox. Something I'm interested in.
This is going to throw another curve into everybody's math, because they're also looking at cosmic rays possibly liquefying magma. In other words, making lava more liquid, which could in turn make volcanoes erupt. So there's that. Yay!
Alright, so a wild fox appears. Something I'm interested in. Where does wind come from? Alright, so a wild fox, simple explanation is wind is a byproduct of the Coriolis effect. We spin our own circumference in a 24-hour period, which is why that's the length of a day. When we make that spinning, imagine being on one of those teapot rides. When you get towards the center, you seem to be moving really fast. So at the equator, the wind is a byproduct of the planet moving and the air moving opposite. And what it does is, because we're spherical, it creates cyclones of air that move. And the cyclones, you almost have to imagine it as a soccer ball, where every patch on the soccer ball would be a cyclone of air moving against all the cyclones around it. Or
if you want to visualize it, look at Jupiter.
Yeah, Jupiter does it to an extreme effect. They have storms that are in excess of 600 miles per hour that would literally throw dust fast enough to rip the skin off your face.
Those bands are different speeds. So depending on how far north and how close you are to the equator, the air actually moves in a band motion.
All right, now part of what helps this is there's a heating and cooling effect. The air at the equator is trying to disperse because it heats, it thins out, and it spreads out. So at the equator, when the air heats, it's trying to spread. It's trying to move north. At the same time, at the north, you have the equator that has cool air. Cool air, as we know, sinks, whereas hot air rises. Now, you have to imagine the planet being 3D in your head. But open your freezer door and watch the cool air just fall on a humid day. And imagine that kind of happening, and then warm air rushing in, and you see how that freezer air spins in a circle. Well, this happens on large scale effects, almost to, again, where you'd be looking at your soccer ball, and each patch would be turning one way. Or the clock assembly on the inside of your watch, where one gear turns, and then it turns 4 other gears, and those 4 gears turn 9 other gears to get all the functions to work. it builds outwards from its location, and the whole planet is covered with this around the planet. I'm still talking. I know I'm still talking.
Then you also have high pressure and low pressure, and
Yes,
high
and this
pressure
is
always is attracted to low pressure, and low pressure is always attracted to high pressure, because ultimately this is type of a fluid dynamic, and everything is trying to equalize. So you have that also.
yes. And as you do this around the planet, these effects move. So as heating and cooling moves, a large hot cell moving is going to grow, a large cell is going to shrink. The large cell will start moving fast, come up against the slow moving big hot cell. They'll conflict. One will rise over the other. They'll spin each other, and this is where the storm begins to build.
Yeah.
Throws bone.
So that's where we now, back in the old days, it was God blows.
I'm not sure.
You know, they
I
even
have
showed
to be honest. Hold on. I'd hate to take a break. Data, hold on. Something is wrong with Streamlabs today. It is not.
Oh?
It's not loading properly. First, it took me 20 minutes to get the Streamlabs stuff to load for the show. Now I can't get the site to load because somebody, which I can tell is Tangerine Orange, subscribed, and it's not working. And I'm going to hit this button here and see if this goes through. No. Why does that not work either? There's something wrong with Streamlabs. I'm using two different Streamlabs items. I've never had a conflict. They both work because they do different things. This one has a setting I can... Something's wrong with Streamlabs. I tried closing the site and rebooting it. Something's wrong. So if anybody does anything with Streamlabs, I apologize and appreciate.
I don't know if you made these 3 points, but the three steadfast arguments to man-made climate change are: one, when it comes to science, there is no democracy. So it doesn't matter if you have 1,200 people deciding something is true, because, frankly, every time science has made a major change or a major discovery, it's usually one guy against 1,500 scientists that are steadfast believing in the norm, and the one guy standing up to them saying, no, 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 guys, you're all wrong. It's this way. That's number one.
That is very important to mention. I didn't think about that part.
Number two, again, when you're dealing with something as complex as weather and time and history, and you're dealing with these computer generated models, they're constantly tweaking and tweaking and tweaking these models to have them come out with the right answer for today and the future. But if these models were right, then you should be able to roll these models back to the past, and they should match with all the history, and they don't. And then, finally, ultimately, there's been many people that are coming up, that basically are looking at the data, and they're seeing how the data is manipulated. To give you an example, everybody always points to the ice core samples, CO2 and temperature. But if you look at the graphic representation of CO2 and temperature, and you line them up side by side, you will notice something glaringly wrong. And that is that the temperature goes up, and after the temperature goes up, the CO2 goes up. Not vice versa. Not the CO2 is making temperature rise, but the temperature is making CO2 rise. Well, that in itself blatantly, argues the point, and a lot of people call CO2 plant food because when there's an increase in CO2, plants do better. Plants eat CO2 and they put out oxygen. So there's that aspect.
Let's see if this works.
I was listening to the scientists trying to prove the fact that climate change is man-made, and he was in a bathtub, and he was trying to say that here we are in this bathtub, and the water is CO2, and the more we make, the more the water rises in the bathtub, and it's just not going to go anywhere. It's just going to get higher and higher and higher and higher. But even that simple, what the hell is it called? That simple analogy is incorrect because a bathtub has an overflow. A bathtub has a drain. A bathtub changes level when you get in and out of it. I mean, they're trying to make things so simplistic when this is really such a complex issue that they don't have all the answers. Now, am I saying that we don't pollute? Fuck no. We need that. If anything, now if you wanted to say, if you wanted to line us all up or line all the scientists up and ask each and every one of them, do we pollute more than we should? I fully agree that every country, every city, every state, every company pollutes more than they need to pollute. I remember when rivers caught on fire. I remember when you used to drive from New York to New Jersey and you would have to hold your breath. I remember, smog days and days when there were health alerts to the point where people literally couldn't breathe. There's been historical issues where companies have put so much crap into the air that people have died, that people actually had to live with gas masks, that they were forced stuck in their homes sealing their windows. So yes, the EPA, there's a reason for the EPA, there's a reason for rules and regulations when it comes to pollution, because if you give a corporation 2 outs, if you give them an out where they can pollute and pay a fine, they will pollute and pay the fine every single time.
Absolutely. I don't disagree with that one bit. So you're kind of in the same agreement I am that global warming is happening.
Teflon is being found in the Amazon.
Say it again?
I said Teflon right now is being found in the Amazon. Teflon is literally in everything in the entire world. It has polluted our bones, our cells down to the molecules, because they were just dumping it into a river.
Yeah.
They were dumping their effluent into a river.
See, now I started out the stream saying that people are responsible for a portion of it. That portion is measured between 2 and 20%, depending on the scientist you talk to, for the overall contribution of humanity to the global warming. To be realistic, that means we really haven't done much, but we could do a whole lot worse.
Do you know the very
I just lost you.
wasn't about global warming? And I think you could probably find the video on YouTube. But in the 70s, when this shit first came out, it wasn't about global warming at all. It was about a new ice age.
Yeah. And we kind of went through a small cooling period there. Oh, I don't have it open anymore. On the links provided in the description of this video / stream, there's one that illustrates that we kind of went through a cooling period back in the 1600s, and then another one here recently to a much smaller scale. So to say that the planet is warming or cooling because of something we're doing, if it was because of our contribution, the contribution hasn't necessarily changed in any 1 year enough to change or to show the fluctuation is based on our contribution.
Yeah, if you look at like the monthly temperature reports, they're also constantly being modified. Constantly being modified. They start out with mostly gray, a little bit of pink here, a little bit of blue there, and it's funny how all the gray turns pink, all the blue disappears.
Yeah, this is broken.
There's a
if you
channel.
Look at the climate models and you try to watch. I watched a long video on how the climate models started, how they progressed, how they're built, and how they proceed now. And I watched another one showing those very same climate models running projections from 2001 to 2099. And the projections showed that the Earth is going to heat up, and
we lost you. We lost you at projections.
I think you lost me. I'm losing you in and out. I'm green on all bars, but it could be my connection because I'm having a hell of a time with Streamlabs here. Look into a number of papers written on global warming compared to global cooling by year. You see that the main focus was on global warming. However, before global warming was an issue, they were watching temperature drops. And they were saying that this is, late 80s, they were saying that we were about to lead into another cold era that we had just gotten out of. And then it turned into, but wait, the overall temperature is going up, so we're in a global warming pattern. And
in 1974, we had like one of the worst winters in American history. It got so cold that it actually even snowed in Florida.
It's not impossible for the weather to do strange things. And we're gonna go maybe 6 more minutes, guys, to let you know that we're gonna get ready to get out of here. Get your last bit of gambling in. I'm trying to set this little poll up for everybody if I can get it rolling.
If you want a couple good YouTube channels to listen to, there's Suspicious Observers. The O being a number O, one word. There's also Adapt 2020. That's another one. If you look at those two channels, you'll get a lot of info that you might not normally get. The Adapt 2020 tends to find news reports that are never shown on mainstream media of, like, snowing in June.
Did I just lose you again?
Summer, but if anything, the world is getting colder. Is on that channel. And then Suspicious Observers is what I was discussing earlier about the 300,000 citizen scientists.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Does I have it? Scobot. We created a new poll called Next Week. Take part using !vote space option. 1 is for Q. QAnon has come up again, and I will leave it in the options for people to talk about if it's on their mind. The climate, because we've barely dug into it. I know I tried to bring you a lot of data, but I brought you overall data, not concise, broke down data. So
You said one is for two. One is for Q.
1 is for Q, 2 is for climate, 3 is for ancient structures, because I have a passing interest in ancient structures.
Yeah, I like ancient structures too.
Right? 4 is a Q&A, because we've done several episodes, and I'm sure some of the people that come visit us might want to ask questions. 5 is other. Message me or stop in our Discord for the other, and let me know what it is you want. There is no cost on this vote.
So it looks like...
Hold on. Let me fix that, because I screwed that up. It reset the time.
We have a winner.
Yeah, with ancient structures with 1 vote. Hold on. I'm going to try and run that again for 5 minutes.
No. Ancient structures with 4 votes.
Was it 4? It said 1. I'm going to re-roll this.
We have Adam K, TA, Sora Luna, and TC.
Data.
And another freaking atheist. And Wild Fox appears. And Hawk says. So yeah, it's unanimous actually.
We want to do.
I haven't seen any other numbers.
I'm trying to figure out why things aren't working properly tonight. It worked,
well,
but it reset it to a minute. That's why it only got 1 vote on my end. I have an actual poll counter over here, data. For those who do it in chat, it actually counts.
Stop counting your poll.
But it's important to count your poll.
Your poll doesn't count.
It's important to play with your polls.
Your poll doesn't count.
There we go. It's up. Oh, you guys can't see it. There we go. Now it's up on the screen properly.
What operating system you running, Potato? He's got a Windows 10. He's got Windows 10 Pro on a fairly decent laptop. But laptop. I told him he needs to replace. If he's going to run a laptop, he's got to replace his hard drive with an.
Oh, I'm losing you again.
The problem with the laptop hard drives is they only run at 7,200 to 5,200 RPM, so they're always slow.
Well, I don't normally have a problem. I'm losing you in and out. I don't know if that's Google
I
or
know.
my connection.
You don't normally have a problem, but trust me, your problems will be solved with a solid state drive. If I have an extra one, in the near future, if I have an extra one, I'll shoot it to you.
Oh, also, data. I have a new sound effect just for this show. That was for my other shows, but I like it. But this is sound effect I found just for the Numbed Wasteland.
Yeah. Is it a fart? It's a miracle!
I can see! It's a miracle!
Nice.
I thought that was a good sound effect for this show. Well, that poll is running. How many votes we got in there? Everybody wants to do ancient structures? I suppose we're doing ancient structures next week.
Squirrel wind smells like nuts.
Ubuntu mate. What does that mean? 1804?
He's talking about you loading it and getting rid of Windows and loading it with Red Hat.
Oh. Yeah, I don't have that version. I haven't used.
No, Red Hat is Linux.
I know.
Red Hat is Linux.
I know. I have a couple of copies, just not anything recent. So, thank you everybody. Scrap Windows 10, problem solved. That's probably a pretty good answer, but just so you know, this Windows 10 laptop is running the Streamlabs bot that ever so much harasses you, along with the Fussbot, which also dramatically harasses you, but also runs all these polls and stuff, as well as a voice mixer thing, a couple of sound panels, the OBS broadcaster. I'm also watching a play on the stream. I got the Hangout connected, and a couple of
No,
things
yeah,
I mean, I got a lot going. Just so you guys know.
Your laptop is a decent laptop. I mean, it's not a mobile workstation, but it's almost. But you're only as fast as your slowest part. That's the problem. So if we ever did change your hard drive, then you'd really see your laptop wake up.
Oh yeah, I think my backup drive is, and I need to do another cleanup and move all my files over there that I'm not using for just storage. With that, let me see where that button is, and we're gonna do the rather fond explosion and remind you guys.
Personally, I'd rather have 7 than 10, but
yeah, that's also true. We're gonna remind you guys. Make sure that you mess with some of those buttons on your way out, because YouTube does something if you do. I'm not sure what that is. But please mess with the buttons so I can figure that out, because I'm trying to figure it out. Thank you everybody so much for joining us. I'm glad you came. If you haven't already, please subscribe. Thank you for joining me, Data.
Again, sorry for being late.
Hey, it happens. Working people.
I mean, I was up. I was waiting. I looked over and I saw that you weren't even online. You were completely black. And I saw the link, and then I just sat in my chair and had a cigarette, and then before I knew it, my eyes were closed, and I woke up and it was dark outside, and I'm like, "Oh my God."
All right, well, we'll fix that for next week. I'll sit back and let you do most of the talking while I click buttons. Till next time, guys, have a great weekend. I'll see you all tomorrow.